Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Changing Tides podcast. In each episode, we invite guests to have honest conversations about their mental health journeys with the goal of destigmatizing mental health within the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Due to the nature of the podcast, we'll be discussing a variety of mental health topics and possibly triggering experiences. While we and the majority of our guests are not trained professionals, we encourage you to practice self-care while listening and seek professional guidance if you or a loved one is in need of support. With that said, let's start the episode.
Hello, my name is Sakura Kokumai, and I describe my mental health journey as a learning experience.
Hi everyone, I'm your host, Matthew Yonemura, and welcome back to the Changing Tides podcast, or welcome if this is your first episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. By the time this episode releases, we will be in the midst of some very exciting announcements. So please go over to our Instagram to check out our Give in May campaign, which is going to be going on throughout this whole month. And it's amazing. We're so lucky at Changing Tides to have the backing of the community, the backing of LTSC, and the backing of the listeners of this show to support our ventures into different elements of mental health and different fundraising, and trusting us to do the right thing with the money that you donate. So if you're able to donate, please do. We'd appreciate it. And we're really looking forward to everything going on this month. But I am really looking forward to you hearing this interview. I thought it was fantastic. And, all of our interviews are fantastic, but it's not every day I get to talk to an Olympian. So I'm really excited for you to hear it. And I'm so grateful that this person was able to stick around as the power of my house went out towards the back end of the interview. But she was able to stay on and finish up the last few parts of it so that we could finish the episode. But with all that said, I'd love to introduce the interview that I did with Sakura Kokumai. Sakura, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. We've heard a lot about you through the Terasaki Budokan, through your Olympics journey, through your karate journey, and some of the unfortunate occurrences that have come with your journey, especially during COVID. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I want to talk about you and your mental health journey and why you called it a learning experience. And, where are you with your learning experience and that mental health journey?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And I feel like it's so hard to pinpoint like where and how it started, I guess. Um, I don't know. I guess we can start by talking about how I was as a kid growing up. I was very quiet, very shy kid. And I grew up in two places. I was in Hawaii and also Japan. It was a lot of back and forth growing up as a kid. And I was switching between schools, obviously, different language and different cultures growing up. And karate was that one thing that grounded me as I was going through this journey. And I guess karate, very fortunately, was my outlet. It was a way for me to describe myself. It was my escape. It was my safe place. So I never really thought about it deeply in terms of mental health as a kid. But I always knew that karate was one way to kind of organize my thoughts and also express my feelings, even if I can't get it out in words. Karate was that one way where I knew as a kid that was something that I needed instead of something that I wanted to do.
Hmm.
It was something that I needed growing up. And as a young kid, I actually understood that more than anything else, I think.
Wow, that's cool that you had such a connection to it so early on. Because like for me growing up with sports, it was like, oh, my parents putting me into youth baseball, youth soccer, not
Right.
necessarily loving any of it, but you had such a clear connection to it.
Mhm.
So I want to kind of talk about that more and talk about your upbringing in Honolulu, Hawaii, as well as Japan, and like how you discovered that love for karate.
Mhm. So I started karate when I was 7 in Hawaii. It was at a YMCA. My mom enrolled me into a class. It wasn't my idea. It was more of my parents. And I did everything growing up as a kid, and karate was one of them. I loved sailing. I loved soccer. Terrible at tennis or basketball, anything else. So I was I wouldn't say athletic. I love sports overall. But why karate? Kind of going back to how I explained it, I felt very comfortable when I was practicing. And again, I was very quiet and I was also observant too. I always love to observe how they do certain things. And being in the karate dojo, I guess, allowed me to do that more than other sports where you had to, comparison soccer, you have to talk to other athletes and there's actual teamwork that's involved. And where in comparison karate, you can almost spend most of the training not really talking at all.
Hmm.
If anything, just a simple word of yes, hi, and kind of really focusing on what you need to focus on. I think that space really worked well with me as a kid. um, Anyways, from YMCA, I transferred over to a karate dojo. I guess my mom saw that I didn't hate it, that I actually enjoyed it. And from there, I was just introduced to a lot of athletes, athletes competing in tournaments, athletes representing US to go abroad and travel the world. So that dojo basically expanded my world in karate. And here I am today.
And how big was that jump from YMCA to
Mhm.
the dojo? Like, was it two different worlds? Was it pretty similar?
It was the same instructor, so that jump was
Mm.
very easy. They basically introduced me to a dojo that they trained at. So the transition was very easy. The biggest difference is, I guess, having more athletes in the dojo than the YMCA, and you would see more athletes getting more involved in the sport,
Mm.
and you see the intensity difference as well. I think I enjoyed seeing that
Mm.
as a kid too.
And if you don't mind going back a little bit to, the split between Honolulu and then Japan,
Mhm.
how different was that? How was the time split up? Was it back and forth, or was it like a certain age to a certain age?
Yeah, it was really back and forth. I
Mm.
spent like some of my grade school years in Hawaii. I believe it was like second grade, third grade. I was in Hawaii, and four, five, six, it was back and forth between summer schools and then like actual school in Japan, right? And middle school, same thing. High school, did spend a year and a half in Hawaii, but finished up my high school in Japan. So there wasn't really like a set of like these amount of years here and
Right.
there, but really it was back and forth.
And if you were to look back on that, like, did what role did that play in you, like learning, you know, like talking with kids your age and like the cultural differences, like how like if we could talk about that a little bit more, how difficult was that for you?
Right. I was very it was very difficult, more of language and culture, I think. And the school system is so different. So you do have to behave a certain way
Hmm.
when you're in Japan and when you're in Hawaii. Some things that are acceptable in Hawaii is obviously like a taboo in Japan. So learning those things as a kid was very different. And just the lifestyle too. I think the lifestyle of being in Hawaii after school, activities that you can do versus being in Japan are two complete separate worlds.
Hmm.
But I think again, my personality, I was able to manage the differences. Although it was hard, I kept everything in.
Mm.
So
Gotcha.
that's where karate comes into play. Like I do see the difference. I recognize how different it is. But yeah, I think me holding it within was Eli, I know. Sorry.
No worries. No, we're both dealing with dogs on both our ends.
Yeah.
We'll see if we are able to cut it all out or if we're able to keep them
Yeah,
in, but
if
we'll
you
see
need me
how it
to
goes.
repeat something, please let me know.
I think we're good for now. I think that was
Okay,
fine.
for now
Yeah.
we're good. Okay.
Yeah. But so yeah, going back to, to this day, you preach persistence whether it's
Mhm.
kids, young adults, peers. I've seen like, persistence is a through line for your interviews and just like something that you preach a lot. So did you ever want to give up on karate, and how did you push through those times of maybe wanting to stop?
Right. There were a couple of good times where I wanted to stop karate. And those were different reasons, different times of like my journey. Obviously, when I was younger, the reason why I wanted to stop karate was because it took me away from socializing with friends and actually doing normal things. How did I push through those as a kid? I guess I do have to thank my parents and people around me who actually forced me to do things that I didn't want to do at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually taught me to sacrifice, it's important to you need to sacrifice a few things to achieve what you want. And learning that as a kid has definitely helped me growing up as well. And other times where I did feel like I did not want to, I did lean on that, where as a kid, I learned that there will be times where I want to give up and not practice karate. Um, but I believed that there was um, something bigger on the other side. It was me being competitive with myself too. I did not like the idea of giving up. I did not like the idea of backing out on
Mm-hmm.
something just because it was hard. And I think as I got older, that mentality has definitely stuck through. But learning that as a kid has definitely changed my mentality. Whenever there was a time I felt like giving up, I will ask myself, okay, why? Like, what is the reason? What's going on in your head? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why is it that you're telling yourself this? And then I kind of move forward from there.
And on a smaller scale, like I'm sure like you train. I don't know how many days a week do you train?
6 days a week, six to
Okay,
seven, depending. Yeah.
right. So 6 to 7 days a week of training. Like the mornings when there's like a single morning where you're like, oh, I want to hit snooze so bad. How like
Yeah.
what gets you out of bed? Is it this routine that you just have ingrained, or is it something telling you like get up?
Ooh, just at that point it's autopilot
Mm,
mode. It's more of after. It's
mm,
more of dealing with that after. So let's say I hit the snooze button and didn't do what I was supposed to or didn't do as I planned.
mhm,
Everything kind of comes in more after, where I tell myself, man, like I didn't do this, or
mm,
I didn't do this because I didn't feel like it. It's more of that weird gutty feeling that you
mm,
get after, and that feeling I hate the most. So it does come with experience too. There were times where I did that a few times, and I did not feel overall like later in the a few weeks later, I felt horrible.
mm.
So knowing how that feels of little bit of regrets of not doing certain things has helped me get up every morning, because I try to avoid that feeling as much as I can.
I have to tell you though, for most other people, most of us, we're feeling the opposite way. Like, oh, I would have rather have slept in. But that's the reason why you're the champion, and so it makes sense.
It's balance. It's
Yeah,
balance for sure. My friends have to force me to relax and rest a little bit.
yeah,
So there's definitely pros and cons with that.
100%. But in this venture, this lifelong career
Mhm.
in karate, it's not necessarily a sport where the big money comes in, whereas like a soccer star is making, like, it's ridiculous. Like I don't even want to talk about it. It's ridiculous.
Right, right,
But can you talk about what it's like to pursue like a full-time corporation job that you did have at one point and
right.
still pursue karate at night? Like, what's the physical and emotional toll that takes place at those times where you have to keep yourself going financially, but you're pushing for this like more this dream pursuit of karate?
Right. Yeah, it's karate is such a minor sport compared to any other any other Olympic sport or sports in general. And Olympics did definitely change a little bit of that during those like 2 to 3 years window.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, before it all started, I did have a job at a corporate company, and I did my best to juggle both. It was something that I definitely needed to do because at that time we needed to fund our ways to events, and these events is what gets us to the games. So straight out of college, I got the job, and it made sense at that time. And they were, very flexible at the beginning, where they allowed me to be in the office in the day during the day, and I would leave just a little bit earlier than everybody else so that I can train. But as months go by, you realize that other athletes in different countries are training and prepping differently, right? um, as much as karate is a minor sport, depending on the country, athletes are treated differently.
Yeah.
And some athletes are living like they're like real professional athletes.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to me going out into competition, seeing other athletes prep the way they prep and train and compete how they are. It was very frustrating because I believed that I could get myself in that position, but the environment wasn't allowing me to. So I tried to change the things that I could change, which was, training time, right? Obviously, the training time was the most, that one thing that was bothering me. I was even falling asleep as I was stretching a certain period of time because I was so tired. And I was questioning myself, like, okay, what do I actually want at this point? Because I'm putting 50% on the job and 50% on karate, and I'm not getting, like, I'm not one enjoying the job, and then two, like, karate is just kind of falling apart because of it. So the decision of leaving the job and pursuing karate wasn't that hard. um, that decision wasn't hard. The hard part was, okay, what am I going to do from here?
Right.
That part was the hard part. But I guess I'm that type of person that makes decisions, and you know the how usually comes in later.
Mm.
So I was able to quit that job, and I moved here to California, where I stay with the host family, and they helped me a lot leading up to the games. So again, those balance and trying to train like a real athlete while you don't get much support was and is definitely challenging. And as we got closer to the Olympics, I was very fortunate to have a few sponsors that did help me along the way, and that has helped me tremendously. But now we're back to kind of funding our own way. So it's kind of back to zero in that sense,
Mm.
because I felt like we did so much as a sport being in the games. And now, because we're not in Paris Olympics, it's just like,
Mm.
you know, we're back to zero again.
I didn't know that karate was going to be taken out for Paris. Is that what you're saying? It won't be in the
Yeah.
Paris Olympics?
So, yeah, there's no Olympics anymore for us.
Oh,
We
wow.
were the ones and last. Like, I mean, hopefully we bring it back in LA
Mm-hmm.
or something. But as of when Tokyo was happening, we all knew that this was going to be the first
Wow.
and last. That
Wow.
is also the reason why so many of us either put everything into it, or there's some that was just like, okay, that's way too much to, you know,
Yeah.
put
That's
in.
that's something where like it worked out for you
Yeah.
where like you're like let's just go for it. But that decision to go all in,
Yeah.
that's tough. And I wanted to know, like, you said it wasn't a difficult decision, but like, was there something that clicked or changed, or was it just kind of like a day you decided this is the day we're going to go 100% into karate and leave the full-time job?
Um, ooh, was there a moment? Um, it's a yes and a no.
Mm.
Because again, I wasn't doing well in tournaments. My competition results was bad, and also it wasn't just the results, but even how I felt prepping for a tournament, going to a tournament, competing on tournament. Like I did not feel good at all.
Right.
Sometimes you can go to a tournament, you feel great, and you just can't get the result that you want. But overall, I just didn't feel good about myself. So that was like the big indicator saying, okay, like it's time to switch up the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so leaving the job wasn't that hard for me. And when the family reached out saying, hey, we have a bedroom for you, you can just come, that was like another plus where like, oh, okay, I have a roof over my head. I can go somewhere and I have somebody to rely on at home. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
check. And I think starting from that year, we started getting reimbursed for trips. So it all kind of lined up in a way where it's like, okay, I have a home and we're being reimbursed for trips. So that's like the minimum thing that you need
Right.
in order to get yourself started. So I was like, okay, I have that. That means I can leave this. Let me
Yeah.
just pack everything and go over there. So yeah.
Gotcha. So I love to hear that you did have, some backing. You had this home, you were able to do the reimbursements, like you had support behind you. But in your journey towards the Olympics, which I would love to discuss, we're going to get there. But you did describe like this journey towards this pursuit as being lonely.
Mhm.
And, for someone who sees your credentials as karate champion, like some might not understand how a professional athlete or someone who's like one of the best in their sport could be like lonely as like an elite athlete. You'd think like, oh, the fans of the sport, it's all over there. But
Right.
please describe like this lonesome feeling that you had while pursuing the Tokyo Olympics, and like, you're a human like anyone else. It makes sense. But like if you could describe it, I'd love to
Yeah,
hear.
for sure. So, where do I start? It is an individual sport, one, and I guess we can start by competition schedules. So, our Olympic trials started at 2018 and went over the course of 2018, 2019, and 2020 March. So those two and a little bit 2 years, um, every 2 to 3 weeks, we needed to compete at an international tournament.
Wow.
So anytime I was home to pack my stuff, laundry, put it back in my suitcase, and go.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody is trying to get to the Olympics. So every country you go to, every 2 to 3 weeks, you see the same people all the time
Mm,
from different countries. Because of how karate is here, we never travel as a team. We never had a team that always traveled together. So when we start off the year, we start in France. I go to France, I compete, I come home, I pack, I go to Austria, I come home. So these back and forth is you do everything by yourself. You don't have a coach, you don't have a physio, you don't have a nutritionist
right.
that always checks up on you and be like, all right, like this is your itinerary, this is your plan, what have you been eating, all this stuff that I guess you want to expect as an elite athlete. Like we didn't have that. So starting from that and going to tournaments and competing against other countries who come in as a team, like they bring their own bed, they have the same uniform, everybody's all suited up,
Right.
and everybody's trying to pursue this one goal that comes only once in a lifetime, especially for us because it was the first and last.
Right.
You begin to feel like you're just like one tiny person in the entire arena where everybody is like traveling in packs, right? So that itself, I guess, at some point starts feeling a little lonely. Um, and even training too. I would kind of train in the garage by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Before COVID, I would make my way to Japan. That's where my instructor is, that's where my sensei is. So I would go there and train. I would take the Amtrak to San Diego to work at this facility.
Hmm.
Um, but again, it's like everything is kind of done on your own. So when you win, you celebrate on your own. When you lose, you lose.
Mm,
So I think that entire process was very challenging, just because you were playing with that card of, are you going to make it or not? If not, then, you're kind of done.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those ups and downs and having to deal with the losses of competitions on your own, and yeah, there's just like a lot of factors, I think, that came into it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I could only imagine, especially as you see the other teams or the other countries come in and they come as a group, and like, the way the U.S. might value gymnastics because like it's a group, and I don't think like me either, but I don't think we realize like, oh, that's that's not how it's treated for all the sports,
Right.
and we don't value it all the same, which
Yeah.
is incredibly unfortunate.
Yeah.
And
It's the entire process, right? Like going to tournament, you have to register to get your credentials. When
hmm
you go to that registration, the athletes are sleeping, and
yeah.
the coaches are there, right?
Oh,
And I'm the only athlete. I mean, like, hey,
yeah.
I'm here to register.
Yeah.
you
That's
know,
yeah. That's
um,
unbelievable.
yeah. So those certain things, like you start realizing, like, damn, like I do have to do everything on my own,
Hmm.
But I think as years went by through the qualifier, it was really kind of cool in a way, because towards the end, all the other countries, the coaches were actually kind of reaching out and helping me, because
Oh, that's
I think
nice.
they did realize that, like, okay, Sakura is doing everything on her own.
Hmm.
So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
No, that's super cool. It's cool that it's like, oh, they're your competitors, but like they're still rallying behind you. I think that's amazing. But like, yeah, it's you know, I do have another question kind of related, and it's when you weren't able to go to San Diego or Japan,
Mhm.
and it was before the Olympics, and a lot of people saw it. It was this moment that happened in 2021. And it was one of these times when you weren't training in a facility, you were at like a public park, it looked like.
Yeah.
And it's something that, if you don't mind, we discuss, even because I'm sure you've discussed this everywhere already. But it's this hate crime that you experienced while training for the Olympics, by a man threatening to hurt you, calling you racial slurs, etc. Um, Now that you've had over a year removed from this, what comes up emotionally when you think about it, and like what do you remember from it?
Right. Um, it was definitely something that changed the way I look at things, and also how, unfortunately, how I feel sometimes of being in certain places. Again, being brought up in Hawaii and Japan, I was very fortunate to be in a position where I didn't really have to worry about things like this, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when it happened at the park, obviously at that time I wasn't sure what was going on. If anything, I was just trying to analyze, why this stranger was yelling at me.
Right.
And it's not until later when he walks away you start realizing what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely going back to the park was hard after, especially when I knew that he was still around too. The fact that I had to think about, should I go back to the can I go back to the park, right? Or can I walk outside? Because I know it was close to the house. So those thoughts was very frustrating to me, because I've never thought, like, my thought process was never that, no matter where I went, especially when I'm home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and leading up to the Olympics too, you want to feel like you want to feel strong. Like, you don't want like a simple thing at that time. Like, that was my thought process, right? Like, why am I scared of going back to the park? Like,
Yeah.
why am I like so worried about, like leaving the house,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that itself was like very frustrating in my head, because I was never that person. Um, but I was able to channel that frustration and anger into my training as weeks passed by, because again, I was training for the games and it was the biggest tournament that I was working towards, and I did not want that one thing to affect how I prepped for this event. So after a few weeks, I managed to, use that as motivation. And if anything, it gave me more boosts. Like I was like,
Mm,
all right, you know what? Like I'm here to, you know, work hard, train hard so I can
yeah.
represent and go out and do my thing. And it ended up being something positive for sure. And it made me, stronger as a person. And it definitely helped, see what's going on in a world in a different perspective. Uh, but now being here too, it's the fact that I'm able to talk about it too, I think is definitely a bigger step as well.
Yeah. And I remember when this all happened and, it was on all social media platforms, like, my family saw it, like my parents saw it, like they're not always on social media. And I remember like the first thing my mom says to me is she should have beat him up. Like, like that was the first thing my mom said. I was like,
Yeah,
I mean, maybe you probably could have, but you're saying you're not that person. And that, I don't think, karate,
yeah.
you don't have to be a violent person, obviously. So,
That too,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's interesting to know that because like just because you're in a sport like a martial art, and these days people might associate martial arts with like MMA or like the UFC, and
Mhm.
like that doesn't mean that you have to be that. Karate is an art form at the same time.
Right,
So it was just it's interesting to hear that like even though you're trained in this martial art, it still sparks fear in you, which totally makes sense,
mhm.
because in the moment you handled it as if like, oh, like in the video for me it seems like, oh, if this guy got too close, you'd know what to do.
Yeah,
But like obviously that's a moment that sparks fear in you.
yeah,
um so when it comes to being like a public figure, like in this moment, I don't think this he didn't know that you were who
no,
you are, right?
no, absolutely not.
Right. So when it does come to being a public figure, I'm sure that every now and then you might experience anti-Asian sentiment, but maybe you don't read the comments. I don't know how it
Yeah,
reaches you if it does, but if you ever do see it, how do you deal with it in those rare moments, or if they happen frequently,
right,
regardless, like how do you deal with these times?
for sure. It definitely did not bother me at all, especially before the incident at the park.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I've received some a few times here and there, or even personal encounter with people, just like through a conversation, you
Mm-hmm.
would realize that, you're just being judged or you're being talked to the way you are because of how you look and, you know, but how I don't know. I really do my best to not pay too much attention unless they're all over your face about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that becomes an issue for me as well. And I would probably stand up for myself if
Right.
it gets to that point. But anywhere that's not, I focus on myself and I just try to be a good example and do my thing, especially even at the park too. Like I said, I wasn't sure what was happening, but in the back of my head, I was kind of aware. And like everybody said, right? Oh, Sakura, you could have, right?
Right.
Beat him up. You could have done this.
Right.
Um, but one, that's the first thing you learn in karate. It's not you're not supposed to attack. It's more for self defense.
Right.
And um, two, also that's something you learn as well, probably of controlling your emotions and being mentally strong. Somebody can frustrate you so much, and once that starts affecting you, then you know who's not to blame, but um, the person who can control the mind, I feel like is the stronger person. So whenever it comes a time where I feel frustrated or anger towards certain things, I do my best to, analyze the situation first. But again, I think it just depends on the level of things. Yeah.
we're taking a quick break to introduce Anchor, the sponsor of this podcast. Anchor is free, first and foremost, which is amazing. Who doesn't love free? And you can record everything directly into Anchor. It's so easy to use Anchor. That's how you are listening to this podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple, the Anchor website. You're listening to it because I uploaded this podcast episode to Anchor. If you want to start your own podcast, I highly recommend Anchor. It's made this whole process so easy. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now to bring it all together, all these experiences that led up to it, but the 2020 Olympics, please tell me, what was the experience like? Pros, the cons, if you took anything away from it all, I'd love to hear about what your experience was like.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience looking back. The fact that it happened, I
Yeah.
think was a huge win for all of us. And I'm so glad that Japan was the one that was hosting it because they did an amazing job of organizing. Even in the middle of the world pandemic, they managed to organize everything. We were kept in a bubble most of the time, being tested every day. But again, it was my first Olympics, and it was the first time for me to represent Team USA at the games. So I tried to take in everything that I could at that moment, and but also try to focus on the competition too. I'm that type of person that I put myself in this crazy tunnel vision, and whenever I travel to different places, I don't go anywhere. I don't enjoy it as much because I focus so much on prepping and competing. But this Olympics, I did my very best to enjoy it whenever I could. Taking photos, saying hi to athletes, just enjoying the vibe, because being in athlete village and seeing other athletes just walk around, it's such a amazing feeling to have. I don't know, just the fact that you're there and you're just looking around like, oh man, like these are all Olympians, all of you, like
Yeah.
everybody, like we're all here, right? And it came from one year being postponed too. I think it was something that everybody celebrated, of one, being there, but two, in the midst of the world pandemic, we all managed to be in this one place from all over the world. Even though if we're masked, we're still like physically here and living the life of being at home and seeing people through Zoom and jumping into the Olympics
Right.
was a big leap for
Uh-huh.
and yeah, my family flew to Tokyo. They got the closest hotel that they could get from the venue because no spectators, right?
Right.
But they managed to try to be there physically closer. They found a entrance where the shuttle bus goes in and out of, and I saw them through my bus window. And from what I heard they were there for a little bit and they like ran straight back to the hotel to watch the tournament.
Oh, that's so cool. That's
Yeah.
so sweet.
Yeah. It was amazing. Yeah.
Was there any athlete or athletes that you were like, whoa, I'm in the same place as you? Like, were you shell shocked ever?
Gosh. So many. Well, athletes were coming in and out. I heard this was a big difference because usually when you finish competition, a lot of athletes stay in the village. But there was a rule where you finish when the sport finishes within 24 hours, you're kicked out of the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I didn't see swimmers. I didn't see the gymnasts. Like it was a lot of in and out with sports. So there's some athletes where I was like seeing from afar and I was like, is that you? And again, mind you, we're all wearing masks,
Right.
right? So
Right.
we do this thing every time you walk past somebody, because we're wearing an ID. It's like you look at their eyes and you kind of slowly look at their ID and their eyes, and then you check which country, and you do this thing up and down just to not be this weird person to approach.
Uh-huh.
But actually, I kind of messed up. I saw Allison Felix a few times,
Okay.
and I chickened out and I didn't say hi. Uh,
that must be an interesting balance because you're like, oh, I'm here too. Like we're in the same boat, but like
yeah,
you might want to be a fan at the same time. Like it's
yeah,
a
and I love her. I think I crossed paths with her probably like 3 times, not to sound weird and crazy. The one time I think I recognized it as we were walking by, so I did one of those turnarounds, and I go, and that's it.
uh
The second time we were in the elevator, but I also knew that she was competing the next day.
mm,
So in my mind, I was like, and we were all like, it was a lot of us in the elevator,
uh
and I just like kind of sit there.
mm.
And the third time, I just saw her from afar, and I just like holding my head. I was like, oh God.
No, I think that's valid though. I mean, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry, you're a human. We're all it makes sense.
Yeah.
But how in terms of the competing side, how did you feel competition wise? How was it? What was it like to be on that platform? And what's your takeaway from that?
I felt the most calm and comfortable as like any competition. And I think that's one thing I wanted walking out of that tournament. Before I even went there, I told myself that I wanted to give everything that I could, and I wanted like no regrets.
Hmm.
Right. And I've competed so many times leading up to it. I know my routines. I know how I might feel before competition. I know things could go wrong on the day of the event. There's so many factors that goes into play and so little you can control.
Right.
But I told myself that anything that I can control, I'm going to control it. And I'm not going to have any regrets whatsoever. And that was that one tournament. I feel like everything like it all went as planned in terms of what I could control. Um, Even sleeping the day before, I slept great. I woke up and I was actually excited.
Mm.
I felt good. I wasn't nervous. Like I was ready to prep and like get my backpack. I was like ready for everything.
Right.
When I went to the venue, I believe that was the first time. We didn't even get to go to the venue to check the place.
Wow.
So on the day of competition was the first time I set foot in the venue. Um, good side to things. I competed there many times,
Mm.
so I know the layout. I know where everything is. The only difference was banners and more
Mm.
people and more cameras, but I knew what it looked like, and like every entrance where to go for bathroom, like I knew where to go.
That's
So
from growing up in Japan, right? That's is that why? Because of growing up, or
no, so that it's a martial arts venue, and a
oh,
lot
okay,
of competitions were held there.
gotcha.
So as a university student, that place
Mm.
was like the place for competitions.
Gotcha.
And even as a kid, I would go there to watch older people compete. So that's why I knew the place
Gotcha.
very well. And yeah, so getting myself there, like I said, there's more staff, right? Because it's the Olympics. But I recognize a lot of the staffs too,
Hmm.
because there were volunteers from universities around that area. So I would recognize some faces. Um, like a lot of senseis, like instructors were volunteering, and they'll introduce me to their students. So they'll pull somebody and like, hey, if you need somebody, like tell her, right?
Super cool.
So being able to understand the language, one, knowing the people there, two, like almost everybody I knew in that staff,
Wow.
like volunteer staff. Um, and even like that one person who calls you from staging area to get to like the warm up, because
Uh
there's a
huh.
lot of movements in the venue. You don't go to just one place and then compete. You're taken to this hallway, you change, you go to another room to warm up, you go to another room before you walk into the big stage.
Right.
So those, you know, pathways, like every the volunteers I knew, so they were like, okay, so you go here, there, boom, 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 and I just had to navigate my way.
Right.
So that made me very comfortable, and that definitely helped me mentally get where I needed to be before I walked into the stage. They had this video like montage that was ready. They had this countdown from 10 all the way to 1, and then they had the lights, then you go out, right? So everything like mentally and emotionally, like I was able to build up
Mm-hmm.
lead going up to the ring. And again, I felt good. I was very, very upset with obviously losing that bronze medal match, but I think looking back, the fact that I was able to give it my all in my performance meant everything to me. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, and I, that goes back to what you said earlier, like almost in the very beginning of this interview, was that, you know, controlling what you could control, and, you just want to feel comfortable. That was what you were saying earlier. Like you want to feel good about what you did, and that's what you was the result. And I think that's amazing that that's what you were able to achieve at
yeah,
the Olympics as well.
yeah, for sure.
Um, so where are you now? What does your journey look like, and where do you go from here?
Where am I now? Still living the same lifestyle in a way. I have competitions coming up. I'm actually leaving this week and also next week. Um, Big competitions that I planned, which is Pan Am's end of May. It's in Curacao.
Hmm.
And there's actually going to be a World Games. So World Games is held every 4 years, and
Wow.
it's not just karate, but like all sports.
Wow.
And that will be in Birmingham, Alabama. And I love that we both laugh.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like that's the last place. I know you said it's all sports, but it's the last place you expect karate. So
Yeah,
it's
so USA is hosting it,
okay.
and that's going to be in July. So that's a one big tournament that I'm prepping towards. Um, I guess I'm trying to enjoy the process now more. I was very mm, even training and prepping for tournaments, competing. When you're younger and obviously aiming for something so big, it's not that your motivation is like um, the fear of losing, but it is a part of it. The part that it's part of, you know, getting yourself to practice every day and, um, going out to train and compete. And I wouldn't say it's the most healthiest way,
Hmm.
only because you're under this stress, right? Of you wanted to prove yourself and you wanted to make sure that you have the right results. And it was just a lot of emotional roller coasters leading up to it. But this year, I told myself that I wanted to enjoy the process more. I wanted to take that time to put myself in a position where I'm around athletes, when I'm around people, so that I can, just have fun training, right? Training is never fun. It's always hard.
Hmm.
But if you have people around you where you can push yourselves, then training just becomes a little bit more fun and enjoyable. So this year the goal is that just to enjoy the process more and have fun with the journey. Not that I didn't have fun before, but I think just the mental side is very different compared to
Hmm.
before and now. So that's the biggest thing. Other than that, I'm taking more time to teach any seminar opportunities or teaching opportunities I have. I make sure I get myself there so that I can work with kids and even adults with different levels. And yeah, just kind of working my way through. We do have to fund ourselves this year. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of juggling different jobs here and there and trying to make my way to
Hmm.
these tournaments.
And one of these opportunities that you had, it wasn't necessarily teaching, but you were one of the speakers at the Terasaki Budokan grand opening, and along with Jerry West, like NBA legend, the logo, you were in good company, and you were up there with being as big of a deal as Jerry West. So like, what does a space like the Budokan mean to you,
Mhm.
and to the Little Tokyo AAPI community.
Right. Now that event went so well. He gave the most amazing speech. You know, nowadays we're so used to recording stuff, right? Like when you see somebody or when you hear
Right.
something, we're so used to putting up our phones and then trying to capture that moment. That entire speech, I had my phone in my pocket and I was just there to listen. Right. And every now and then I'll take notes. I was like, okay, like he said something good. Like let me
Uh-huh.
put that down. But to be alongside him and to be a part of that grand opening was so special. And to see everybody come together that day, I it realized how important it is to have that facility there. Again, going back to practicing karate in a YMCA and being in a dojo where I felt like I belonged somewhere. I really hope that that place becomes, you know, that place where people, kids, like adults, anybody can call their home or what a place they can go back to. I went back probably once or twice after the grand opening. I'm actually going today too.
Nice.
Um, but I was there again, and I don't know, it did bring back that feeling of being around just people. You see kids playing basketball, you see just people coming in and out, and I was having like little bento like dinner with my friends at the patio outside, and
Right.
we're just there, you know. So that feeling kind of brought back memories as a kid, because I grew up in that kind of environment where I wasn't home, I wasn't at a dojo, but I was just at that one place where I just constantly saw people walking in and out, and I was just doing my thing.
Uh-huh.
So I really hope that that place becomes a facility, like just a home where people will feel welcomed.
I'm so jealous. I was in a boot at the time because I hurt myself. It was my driving foot. I couldn't make it out there.
Oh no.
So jealous. It looked like such an amazing event, and but I'm so glad to hear that you enjoyed it. You know, even as a speaker and a presenter, like, you know, sometimes you're not able to enjoy it when you're kind of behind the scenes.
For
But it's
sure.
great to know that you're able to enjoy it and you're able to enjoy it still as you go back.
Yeah.
Uh, you know Ryan, I'm assuming Ryan Lee.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm interviewing him later this week as well. So,
Oh, nice. Amazing.
good Budokan company coming onto the podcast. But yeah, it's so great that you were a part of the Budokan and that, you know, you're able to use one of your sponsors to help, you know, create the events and create resources for the facility. Before we move on to the quickfire round, is there anything else you'd like to say before we jump to that?
I think you covered a lot of good questions. But again, I think for me, when we talk about the mental health journey, I was that kid that obviously kept everything within, and that habit still sticks within me. But I did learn to reach out to people more, and I learned to analyze or learn to analyze um, my thought process in a different way. I did had karate. That was a really good outlet for me where I was able to express myself. But I think, you know, it's just important to take it step by step. And without karate, I don't think I would not be where I am today. And without karate, I don't think I would not have been able to express how I feel in certain ways. So I think everything for karate helping me grow as a person, but also get through, I think, my mental health journey as well.
Good.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I do have some quick fire questions.
I'm scared.
No, they're nothing crazy. I promise. So first, Japan or Hawaii?
Oh, you said it was easy. Man, let's go with Japan.
Okay.
Where all my family's from.
Okay. So then I'm gonna ask Japan or LA?
Ooh,
Okay.
Japan. Yeah.
I don't blame you for any of that. I've only been to Japan once,
Uh,
but I would agree. So, yeah. Sorry, I thought these were gonna be easier than I said. So this question is more for me than it is for the audience. But when you are in LA, you crave Hawaiian food. Where do you go?
Gosh, where do I go? Oh, I don't think I've found like a real go-to place yet.
Okay.
Recommendation, everybody? Comment
Yeah, no.
below.
Yes, comment below, please. And also, I'm sure I would ask you about Japanese food, but DTLA, you could go anywhere, Little Tokyo. So I'm sure I don't think you need to pick just one.
Yeah.
Hawaiian food was more so where I was curious.
Right, right.
When you're not training, what do you like to fill up your free time with?
Nice walk outside by the beach, hiking,
Hmm.
with my camera. I'm learning photography. I love taking pictures, so that's my.
Even when you're not training, you're still being active. That's
I know. I can't sit still.
you got to pick up a video game or
Right?
or
No, actually, my friends have been telling me because a lot of the guys do travel with their game.
hmm.
They just plug into the hotel TV and
Uh-huh.
full time. But I was like, nah, good.
Yeah, the Nintendo Switch that would have been perfect for you.
Right? Yeah.
But no, you're better off without it.
Really? No, I actually want to get into it. Just
I like it's fun, but all I'm saying is please don't blame me if you quit training and purely go to gaming. I'm so
okay.
like please do not blame me. um, your favorite place to travel?
Oh my favorite lucky city. It's like lucky
Okay.
Paris.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think it's
Lucky.
my favorite. I think it's my favorite because I do well in competitions.
Mm,
So the overall experience has always been good. But it's really hard to pick one. I travel to many places and there's some places I really want to revisit.
mm. Okay. We could go with that because it's your lucky
Yeah.
city.
So it's, yeah, keep it at that for
Yeah.
now.
A skill you don't have but wish you did have.
Sing. I
That'd be
wish I could
nice.
sing.
Yeah. Same here. Same here. If you were a superhero, what would your power be?
Fly.
Very good. Very good. If you could invite five people to dinner, dead or alive, who would they be?
Oh, 5 people? So many. That's five is hard. Um, there's so many athletes that I wanted to meet and I met, and I'm just like nervous because it's like I've met them. I don't know. 5 people? You're putting me on the spot here. Uh, sh- like athletes. Like I really want to meet like Shohei.
Okay.
He's pretty. He seems pretty cool. Other actors. Kind of a fan of Simu Liu right now. He's doing his thing, killing it right now.
Uh
And other people, man, you're putting me on a spot. I'm so
huh.
bad with this. I swear. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Everybody, I can name from singers to actors and
That's
athletes.
fine. We'll leave it at that, and then who knows? Maybe you'll comment below with the rest of your answers. We'll see
Right.
when this comes out.
You'll have a list.
Yeah. And then to round it out, what would the title of your autobiography be?
Funny thing is, I actually thought about this. Title of my I'm just saying it because it was a joke amongst
Okay.
friends. But my friends and I will always say this. It sounds negative, but it's not. We say I tried every now and
Hmm.
then just to make things feel better. So whenever things go wrong, or even if things go right, like the idea was, well, at least we did it, like
Yeah.
we tried it and like if it worked, like yes, like we tried and it good and it worked.
I
And
think
sometimes
that's
and then sometimes we tried and it didn't, so we just go like, oh, we tried. So there was this joke that went around saying, oh, what if your book was titled this way? I was like, that's terrible.
I think it's
But I
valid
just
though.
saying it because I thought it was funny.
I think it kind of makes sense though. I don't think it's as sad as you might think. I think it makes
I
sense.
think
Like
it's
you went
funny.
for it.
It
Yeah.
definitely will not be it. I
Okay.
want to name it something more cool and
Gotcha.
meaningful. But yeah.
Gotcha. Well, Sakura, thank you so much. You powered through my power going out on us, like towards the very end of this interview. So I appreciate you for sticking with me through that. I appreciate you taking the time, and maybe I'll see you at the Budokan one of these days. But otherwise, thank you so much, and good luck with everything.
No, definitely. Thank you for having me, and hopefully I get to see you in person too.
Yeah. Thank you again to Sakura for talking about the karate journey that she has been on, for talking about mental health, for talking about the Olympics, to talking about being in the public eye, and talking about the unfortunate event that we did discuss that happened back in 2021, and for being so open and candid in the way that she was. You know, we don't always hear about professional athletes opening up about mental health and being vulnerable. We hear about it a little bit more now these days, but you know, it's rare. So it's so great to hear that from Sakura. But with all that said, if you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to our show for episodes that release on every other Tuesday, and give us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform, especially if you're on Spotify. I did notice that we don't have any Spotify ratings yet, so if you want to give us some ratings, especially if they're good ones, that'd be great. If you would like to support our podcast and help us grow, you can do so with a donation to the link at the bottom of the episode description. To hear more about Changing Tides, follow us on Instagram at LTSC_Changing Tides, or check out our website, thechangingtides.org. Let's continue to change the tides on mental health.